Hi, everyone. Before we dive in, I invite everyone to close your eyes. And collectively, we'll take a big inhale in and out. And one more in and out. Now, with your eyes closed, I invite you to engage your senses. What can you hear? The sound of my voice, your cell phone vibrating, the sound of the air conditioning unit. What can you taste? The lunch you just had, a coffee as a pick-me-up, maybe some gum to mask that lunch. But more importantly, what can you smell? Perfume or cologne you sprayed this morning, fabric softener clinging to your clothes, or maybe your neighbor's breath from the lunch they just ate. And with your eyes closed, I invite you to change the world around you. I ask that you think back to a fond moment, a core memory as the kids are calling it these days. In this moment, what do you see? What can you hear? What can you taste? And more importantly, what can you smell? With a big, deep breath in, inhale that moment, and exhale. I'd like you to keep focus on that moment and slowly open your eyes. Under your chairs, you'll find a blotter dipped in fragrance. Feel free to smell this as much or as little as you'd like during our time together. I started in the fragrance industry about 10 years ago, and I had no idea what I was walking into. An entire industry built subtly under our noses, from laundry detergents to air fresheners, fabric softener, candles, to even garbage bags and cat litter, and of course the very obvious perfumes. But scent is so much more than that. Neuroscientists suggest that our sense of smell is most closely linked to memory. This is believed to be because of the close connection between the amygdala, which is the area in the brain responsible for emotion, and the hippocampus, the area associated with memory. These memories, our odor-driven memories, are the ones that are most likely childhood memories. These are the years where we experience most smells for the first time. These are imprinted into our brains and can be vividly recalled at the first sign of something that's familiar. In the industry, brands strive to find that balance between nostalgia and imprinting smells to help drive long-lasting purchase. When they're able to find this balance, these standout fragrances, we call them blockbusters. But no blockbuster fragrance is created overnight. It's the work of perfumers who continuously make modifications, changes and modifications to the top, middle, and dry down notes of a fragrance, either based solely on the perfumer's inspiration and creativity or from feedback from the client. What I think is so special about fragrance is that two people can experience fragrance very differently. So if you and the person sitting next to you smell the same fragrance, you can have two very different reactions to it. In the fragrance composition, we have the top, middle, and dry down notes. So our top notes are the notes that you experience first. They're the profile of the fragrance, but they quickly flash off. So I grew up in a pretty small white American town, and I was one of the only few people of color in my school. I tried so hard to fit in, all while trying to make sure that I controlled how people perceived me. I did sports all year round. I joined various clubs. I tried to look like the girls around me, sound like the girls around me, dress like the girls around me, all while trying my hardest to hide my life outside of school. This is assimilation at its finest. In high school, at this time in high school, assimilation to me smelled like Victoria's Secret Love Spell. If you did not have a bottle of Victoria's Secret Love Spell in your tote bag, you were not it. I remember walking around spraying the fragrance before class, before lunch when I knew I was going to see a lot of people, after school, anytime I felt like I needed to fit in. Only my closest friends knew that I took Indian dance classes multiple days a week. I never had my mom make curry before my friends came over because I was embarrassed by how it made our house smell, even though my house didn't smell like everybody else's, but it was mine. It was really exhausting to compartmentalize like that. And so I modified. In the fragrance pyramid, the middle notes appear shortly after the top notes have receded. Middle notes make up about 70% of the aroma of a fragrance, and it's known as the heart of the fragrance. Now, before I go any further, think back to your core memory that we just brought to our attention. Were you able to remember where you were, who you were with, what you were wearing, what you heard, what you tasted? But more importantly, were you able to remember what you smelled in that moment? For me, a lot of my core memories were in my family kitchen with my mother. I couldn't tell you what I was doing, what I was wearing, what we talked about, maybe who else was there, but I can tell you there was a lot of delicious food. So my family is Indo-Caribbean, specifically Guyanese, and Guyana is a small country in South America that was colonized by the British and later became independent in 1966. My ancestors are South Asian, but Guyana is home to folks that have come from all over the world: India, Africa, China, Portugal, just to name a few. Our ancestors brought with us their religion, culture, language, food, anything they could, but they tried their hardest to preserve it with what little freedom they had. And so when it came to food, they had no choice but to cook with the ingredients that were there. So the chicken curry that they ate in the motherland was not the same as what they ate in Guyana. The ingredients were different, the water was even different. And so that's the recipe that was passed down to my mother that we continue to eat now. I could be anywhere in the world, and once that combination of spices hits my nose, it takes me right back home. Home to the place where I've had my deepest thoughts, where I've laughed until I cried and cried until I healed. Home to the place where my mother continues this tradition of cooking and tries to get me to do the same, but let's face it, I don't cook. And so I modified. When we get to the base of our fragrance, or the dried down notes, these are the notes that really anchor the scent and are the longest lasting. So it wasn't until after college that I decided to start showing a little bit more of my life with my friends. I shared soca music with them, I invited friends to family parties, and I really started speaking up about all the similarities that Indo-Caribbeans had to our South Asian counterparts. Fast forward 8 years, I got an email about an audition for an Indian dating show. Now, I'm a try everything once kind of person, and I was like, I tried every other form of dating very unsuccessfully, so I had nothing to lose by sending in my profile. As I went through each step in the audition process, I started each call by declaring, I'm Guyanese, I'm not Indian. I didn't want the casting director or anyone else to think that I wasn't being authentic or that I was trying to be something that I'm not. And so round after round I went, making sure I declared this statement, and then I finally got the call that we were going to start filming. And so I took all of these dates as opportunities, the chance to meet my future husband. And so I prepared for these dates no differently than any other date. The cameras really didn't mean anything to me. So I picked out my cutest outfits, did my hair and makeup, made sure my accessories were on point, and I topped it all off with a spritz of my favorite date perfume. This was the perfume that I earmarked that made me feel the sexiest and most confident in my skin. And so regardless of who was sitting across from me, I walked into every date smelling exactly the same. About a year and a half after we began filming, Indian Matchmaking debuted on Netflix in 150 countries and completely changed my life. And so I modified. In the weeks following the debut of the show, I realized the impact that my presence had on the show. It was in these moments that I realized I represented an entire diaspora. Years of telling people why I looked Indian but wasn't, my story was finally out there for everyone to see. I represented those who were struggling with cultural identities, where they lived versus where they came from. Those whose families had left India and settled anywhere else in the world, in Fiji, in South Africa, in Europe, and even in the Caribbean. And so in those following weeks, I still showed up every day to my fragrance job while I was living on cloud 9, experiencing all of the hype around the show. It wasn't until that moment in my fragrance job that I realized I had created a blockbuster fragrance, and it was me. The fragrance blotter that you have in your hand is a symbol of that, a symbol of me, a symbol of you, and all of our stories. It started when I first sprayed it, it smelled one way, when you first smelled it initially, and if you smell it again in a little bit, it's going to smell later. The beauty of all of this is that it's stayed the same. It's always been that same fragrance as it continues to evolve. And so it was in that time that I knew standing in my own power at my core is how the greatest opportunity of my life so far came to be, because I owned that. No one has my modifications, no one has my experiences or unique notes, and the same goes for you. It's so easy to be labeled as one way or another by individuals who judge us based on our top and middle notes, but at the end of the day, you are the blockbuster of your life. No one has your modifications or your unique fragrance notes or your experiences. So I ask you, when you have a second, stop and smell the roses, because it could be in those moments that your life begins to bloom. Thank you.